On this episode of the Hanford Insider, we get our first look into the Carnegie Museum's Building Kings County exhibit. Rob will give you a look at some of this week's community events, and I'll be back with your sports report. This is the Hanford Insider for Monday, April 6th.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Hanford Insider, your inside look at the stories, people, and history that make Hanford one of a kind. From hidden gems to hometown legends, we're bringing you closer to the heart of our community. I'm your host, Rob Bentley, and this is where Hanford comes to life. So let's get started. In community news this week, the Hanford City Council will meet on Tuesday, April 7th. In the afternoon study session at 4, they'll have an update and funding discussion for Heroes Park. During the regular meeting at 7 p.m., they'll have 3 public hearings, 2 on landscape assessment districts and the other regarding a refuse rate increase. They'll also be looking at applying for another grant to help pay for the East Lacey Corridor Improvement Project. And they'll be receiving a presentation and a request for an appropriation from the general budget by the Department of Parks and Community Services for a 4th of July fireworks show at the Hanford Softball Complex. The complex provides ample and secure space, parking, concessions, restrooms, and a fireworks staging area. If approved, the event will include live music, food and drink vendors, games, a kids' fun zone, and VIP areas. Hanford hasn't had a public fireworks show in a few years, and it will be nice to have a large-scale show again, and maybe, just maybe, it would help cut down on the number of illegal fireworks this year. If you remember, the City Council recently passed a change in the city ordinance that would allow for a $1,000 fine per illegal firework if you were caught in possession of them or lighting them off. I'll be sure to update everyone following Tuesday night's meeting on my social media accounts on the Council's decision to sponsor a show or not. In other community news, if you've been downtown in the last few weeks, you may have noticed the new speaker system installed by Main Street Hanford. Other cities such as Visalia, Kingsburg, and Lemoore have similar setups. This is just one more step in creating a welcoming, lively, and memorable destination for our community. The music sounds great, Main Street Hanford. Thanks for all that you do. Finally, the annual egg hunt at the Civic Park was awesome. Over 800 kids showed up with their parents for the fun, which included an egg hunt, vendor booths, games, Freddy the Fire Truck rides, and carousel rides. And I have to say, the park looks fantastic. And I'd like to give a shout out to all of the City of Hanford crews who does such a great job in renovating the park after Winter Wonderland. Now let's take a look at this week's community calendar. There'll be a parade in downtown Hanford on Thursday, April 9th, celebrating the Sierra Pacific Golden Bears girls basketball team's state championship. The parade will begin at 7th and Harris by the CART station and end at the Hanford Civic Auditorium. The parade begins at 5 p.m. Hanford firefighters will be out at the intersection of 12th and Mall Drive on Friday, April 10th for their annual Fill the Boot fundraiser for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. Saturday, April 11th is sure a busy day. The Sierra Pacific Band is holding their shredding event. The annual Autism Awareness Run will be held at Quail Lake Park. Saturday is also the day for the Hanford Garden Club Garden Tour. And it's also Kids Day at the Longfield Center. If you have an event coming up, large or small, and you'd like some help getting the word out, let's work together. Send your information to hanfordinsider@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe to my weekly newsletter to get a complete calendar of events. It's the most comprehensive community calendar available. During my spring break, I took a little break from the show, but I still wanted to post an episode, so I thought it would be great to share some fascinating local history with you. As you may know, I am the president of the Carnegie Museum of Kings County, and our current exhibition is called Building Kings County. It opened in February. At our docent training, The curators took time to educate our volunteers on the exhibition. As part of the training, I recorded it, and the stories were so good I knew it would be a great fit for this episode. In this portion, curators Jack Schwartz and Michael Seamus share the origins of Kings County.
If you studied anything about California history, you know, from the gold rush through the 1900s, the gold rush was the impetus that got a couple 100,000 people into California. But the railroads, and particularly the Central Pacific and Southern Pacific, which were, for all intents and purposes, one and the same, had a stranglehold on rail transportation. And one of their main lines was going from the Klinga area all the way to Goshen. And so what we have is, thanks to Michael Seamus, we have pictures of all of the stations along that main line and a couple of the spur lines. And we have a little discussion of each of the stations. Now, what people don't realize is that two things. One, if you were here for Kings County Ag Part 1, you learned about the Kings Lakeshore Railroad, which was a tiny railroad that went Corcoran down about 18 miles to a farm. Their entire rolling stock was a boxcar, a locomotive, and a caboose. And so we've got that, and you can see it on the map. Now, one of the things that happened was the way that Southern Pacific worked, and all the other railroads in the Western United States in particular worked, was they had Congress, in order to finance and take the risk of doing these capital-intensive rail lines, they had Congress authorize them to get every other section of land. Okay, section being a mile by a mile. And so they would route their tracks along where they had the land. And what they would do is they would sell their lots. They would form a town, sell their lots to make their money. And they would always try and sell the land around their depots. Okay, that's how they made their money. And it was spectacularly successful for a few, in particular the Southern Pacific. So by between 1870 and 1900, the Southern Pacific had a monopoly, a stranglehold on rail traffic in California, and particularly here in the Valley. And so what we have is we have some discussions going on, but what happened, particularly here in Kings County, was that several people got together, and literally the residents of Kings County led the effort to have competition. And they went up to San Francisco to talk to the Atchison, Topeka, Santa Fe folks and said, hey, why don't you bring a line down into the Valley? Because we need the competition. They also went down to Los Angeles. And once they went to Los Angeles, the Santa Fe people in San Francisco said, oops, we better get going. And so they formed the San Francisco and San Joaquin Valley Railroad, which started construction around 1896 or so, 97, went from Stockton down to Bakersfield, went right through Hanford. Okay, and so that's the discussion you see with the San Francisco and San Joaquin Valley Railroad narrative that's up on top there. The fact is that railroad is closely aligned to Santa Fe, and by around 1900, it became part of the Santa Fe Railroad. But the immediate result of that competition was that freight rates went down significantly. And you've probably all heard of Mussel Slough. The Mussel Slough tragedy happened out here near Hardwick. And what happened was, okay, as I said, Congress would give sections of land to railroads. Well, Southern Pacific went out and said to settlers, if you move on here and improve it, then we'll sell it to you cheap. Well, by the time the Southern Pacific got title to the land, because remember, they get a reservation, but they didn't have clear title until they started putting lines down. By the time they did that, all the settlers around here had improved the land, brought in water, built houses, agriculture. And so instead of like $250 an acre, Southern Pacific came in and said, it'll be $25 an acre. And that caused a lot of consternation. And so at the Grangeville Hall, which is over here, one of the places that the settlers met to organize against and complain about Southern Pacific, one day there was a community picnic gathering. And a U.S. Marshal and a Southern Pacific guy came down and started evicting people. And that led to the shootings. And it became a national cause célèbre. And so we discussed that with the Mussel Slough tragedy, and we have some of the advertisements, the cartoons, whatever you want to call them, from back in the day. And those are the courtesy of the Burris Park Museum. So we talk about Mussel Slough, we talk about the competition, and so that takes us really through around 1900 in terms of the railroads. Now, when the railroad went west from Hanford, they started going towards Armona and Lemoore. Okay, we'll actually talk about that in the Lemoore thing, but what we have here is a diorama of what the train station looked like in Lemoore at the turn of the century. And so that's kind of cool.
What we decided to do is we wanted to talk about what was here before Kings County showed up. And surprisingly, there are a lot of people that don't know that before Hanford, before Lemoore, before Grangeville, before Hardwick, before any town in this area existed, Kingston was here. And now today, Kingston is just a place mark and a park that's closed by the county on the Kings County side of the Kings River. But at one time, that was the only community. That was the only community between Fireball and Visalia. And so what we did was we went through and we searched high and low for photos of Kingston. Now you got to understand, they are very rare. And surprisingly, the best collection of Kingston photos that we found was at the Kings County Library. I could not believe what they had. So I grabbed and scanned the best that they did. So you'll see over here, there is a series of 5 photos that show the progression of Kingston and the bridge and the ferry that crossed the river. What made Kingston was the fact that there was a shallow place in the Kings River where people could cross back and forth. And so a gentleman by the name of Lucas Whitmore came there in 1852, built a boat and tied it with rope across the river and pulled people back and forth across the river at that time. So you'll see up here, picture number 1 is a actual image of the boat that was used to cross the river there at Kingston between the Fresno County side and the Kings County side. The second picture is taken pre-1880, showing the community of Kingston with the town that existed at that time. The third one is pre-1873. If somebody really wants to get a hold of you, don't they? Showing the town. And then number 4 is an actual picture of the bridge that was built to replace the ferry in 1884, 1885. The last photo shows the condemned bridge around 1909, 1910. What had happened was somebody was herding cattle across the bridge, and the cattle stopped on top of the bridge. They kept bringing more cattle on top of the bridge, and the cattle broke through and fell in the river. And that's why that's that way. So that's just a little description of the community. None of that exists. In fact, the only thing that exists today are the 4 concrete pillars that supported that bridge. They're still there. You've got to look for them, but they're still there. Even more importantly is the fact that the Kings County Library had pictures of some of the most important people of Kingston at that time. The top two pictures were they were Oliver Bliss and Caroline Bliss. They were the owners of the ferry and the bridge until about 1882, 1883. The two middle pictures, that is the Dr. Davidson and his wife, Nanny. He had a life that you could not believe. He was born in Washington, D.C., ended up going to medical school in England, enlisted in the British military, was fought in the Crimean War, came back to New Orleans, ended up fighting for the Confederate side of the Civil War, and then in 1865, he came here and established his medical practice. Later on, he moved to Hanford and ultimately sold his property to the county where they put the courthouse. So his house used to be where the courthouse is now. The other two gentlemen at the bottom, that's Louis Einstein, who owned the Jacob and Einstein store, and Edward Erlinger, who was his bookkeeper, man after my own heart. and so we have a little story about them. Very important people who established Kingston. And everybody, other than the Blisses, everybody else ultimately moved to Hanford. So then we have over here, we talk about Grangeville. So you'll have, these pictures were all taken, I think, in the late 30s or early 40s. Unfortunately, other than the church, everything else is gone. But the most important building that I think shown here is the Grangeville Hall, because that's where the Settlers League met to battle the railroad that ultimately brought up to Mussel Slough. It was in that building. I don't know if that was the Grange building or not. It's called the Grangeville Hall. That was where everybody met. It could have been the Grange. I don't know. Below that, we have some great pictures of Stratford. So we have this nice panoramic photo showing the thriving metropolis of Stratford back, I don't know, 1917, it says. And we have the railroad depot and the Brothers store. Below that, we have the grain wagons would come in from the Tulare Lake bottom, loaded with grain, and they would load them into the rail cars to get out of the area here. This is an interesting photo because the man pictured there is William Stratton. He was the man that the town wanted to name the town after him. They wanted to call it Stratton, California. The post office turned them down because there already was a Stratton in the United States, so they went for Stratford. And the four pictures below that came from the Orton family, showing the way Stratford looked 110 years ago. So, I mean, yeah, it was a really neat town. It's unfortunate that, everything declines, but that's what it looked like. The next area that we have is a discussion of the birth of Kings County. Now, Kings County, the battle to make Kings County was rather boisterous, I should say. It took about 6 years between the time they initially petitioned the state to form a county till it actually became a county. In 1893, the citizens of Western Tulare County petitioned the state of California to form a separate county here. And you'll see that there's this map that has a couple colored lines. So the green section there was the supervisor district, for which is most of Kings County. And you'll see a green line that comes down there in the middle. That's the Kings County that we see today. But the other two, those were competing counties that were thrown into the legislature to stop Kings County. At the time, what was happening was that Eastern Tulare County did not want to lose the tax revenue of the Lucerne district, which was Hanford North. It was the best farmland in the area at the time. And so they fought tooth and nail to prevent Kings County from splitting off. And what they did was they created these two other counties. The red county was to be called Buena Vista County, and it would have made the city of Tulare as its county seat. And the blue line was Putnam County, in which Porterville would have been the county seat. And these were put into the legislature to kind of gum up the works for Kings County. But the the amount of people that were supporting Kings County at the time allowed these other two counties to fail. And so I was really surprised when I was doing that, realized that basically they were trying to do dirty politics to stop Kings County from splitting off. We have here just a timeline for the formation. You can read what was going on. This is the newspaper from May 30th, 1893, that shows the tally. Because what happens is that the state says, okay, we'll let you form a county, but your citizens got to agree to it. And so they had to come back to this area, and all the different communities you'll see right there at the top. Hanford was 715 for and 10 against, but Lemoore was 41 for and 130 against, because Lemoore did not want to be in the shadow of Hanford. They did not want Hanford to become the county seat. And if you'll know, so you want to know, when you look down the eastern border there, why is there this little jog that goes out there? What is that? There is a rule within county law or within state law that says that a county seat can be no closer than so many miles to the border. And so what happened was that they had to go and move the border that mile to keep Hanford to keep Hanford to be the county seat. Otherwise, Lemoore would have been the county seat. So that's the little jog there. So, and anyway, so just a couple newspaper articles. A couple other things here. We have from the city of Hanford, they've loaned us the portraits of Mr. and Mrs. Hanford. Nice guy. I did some research in Fresno about 2 years ago, and that little column there is out of the Visalia Times Delta. That's the earliest known ad that I've ever found talking about buying a lot in the town of Hanford. So that ad came out before the town existed. And that just describes, just the little advertisement. And then I forgot that I had this, and we were talking about it. The map that's in green, the map's in the glass, that was the map used by the railroad to sell the lots. And I found that on eBay. There was a guy in Pacifica that collected maps. He died, and his kids just put the maps up on eBay for sale. And I'm telling you, it was a bid fest for all the different maps. And I was real happy to get that one. The Traver map went for a ton of money. And so just saying, I was real happy to find that. It's great to have here. That's the map that was used to sell the lots. So you'll see there's a little line. They drew a line and they wrote over here, outside blue line for $75, inside $60. So that's a unique map. I mean, I never ever thought I would even find something like that. So the final section over here is early views of Hanford before 1900. And we have this nice map in the middle. This is a Sanborn, a replica of a Sanborn fire map from Hanford from January of 1885. So everything that appears on that map was burned in fires by 1890. I mean, it's really quite sad. So number one, that is the Lafayette House. The Lafayette House was a hotel that sat, you'll see it named on the map there above Doughty Street. It says Lafayette HO. And that was this building. And the fire of 1886 started there and burned the whole town down. And so, in fact, fire is really what created the city of Hanford altogether, because there were so many fires and so much loss, nobody could get fire insurance unless the community incorporated and had the power to tax people to put in fire hydrants. Okay, so you'll see there, that was 1880. That's around 1880s. It says Big Fire of 1886 was built in 1876. Number two, that is looking west on 6th Street. The buildings down to the far left is near where China Cafe is. Star Cafe. That all burned. Number three, that's again looking west down front 6th Street. Some of those buildings still stand today. Below that is a 4th of July parade, same view, lots of dust. Number 5 is Hanford from 1879, and that's looking 6th Street, looking east. And of particular note, on the far right, there's a signage that says Charles Sharp and Company Machinery Depot. So if you know who the Sharp family is, they can point to this picture and say, we've been here since 1879. Below that is the popular bordello called the Lake House, which sat on the south side of the railroad. I don't know exactly where. We know it's on the south side of the railroad, and you'll see it there. This is a view looking east on 6th Street, back towards Visalia, and you'll look along there, you'll see all the grain warehouses that were here. Hanford, initially, its biggest agricultural product was grain, and you'll see all the grain warehouses on that map. So, this is a good representation of very early Kings County, and there's a lot to read and a lot to discuss here. So, 6th Street initially was called Front Street. Now, on the map, it says 6th Street, but people said, we're on front of the rail line. That's where they got the Front Street from. We're right in front of the rail. And so that's where Front Street came from, but it's 6th Street. Yes, they still have that in Ramona. Exactly. In fact, you're going to see as we go over here, there is a view looking west on Front Street along Ramona. So that's it. I mean, I think it's a great representation. Lots of pictures people want to read. Some great readings.
I hope you enjoyed listening to Jack and Michael. The Carnegie Museum of Kings County is located at 109 East 8th Street in downtown Hanford. It is open on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Admission is $5 per person with a $10 family maximum. Next week, we'll hear from the other curators about displays on the Hanford Civic Auditorium, the origins of Avenel, Stratford, Lemoore, and Corcoran, as well as some history of our schools in our county, and China Alley. You can learn more about the Carnegie Museum of Kings County at www.carnegiemuseumofkingscounty.org. My regular interview format will return on April 20th. So let's check in with Eric for a recap of this week's high school sports.
And now it's time for Hanford Insider Sports with Eric Bentley.
A whole bunch of baseball and softball to catch you up on, as all 6 teams competed in Easter tournaments last week. We'll start with baseball, where the Sierra Pacific baseball team's 9-game win streak came to an end in tournament play, but still a positive week overall for the Golden Bears, picking up 3 wins in their 4 games. The action started last Monday with an exciting extra innings 8-7 win over Clovis East, but later in the day the Golden Bears would fall to Stockdale 10-2. Tuesday saw Sierra Pacific bounce back with a 9-8 win over Chowchilla. Then, on Wednesday, the Golden Bears concluded their tournament action with an 11-2 win over University City. After losing their first 5 games of the season, Sierra Pacific has won 11 of their last 12 and will look to keep their perfect league record intact this week with a pair of games versus CVC. The Hanford West baseball team also won 3 of 4 tournament games last week, with all 3 of those wins coming in convincing fashion. The action started early last Saturday with an 11-0 shutout of Firebaugh. Monday's tilt with Yosemite saw the Huskies win 12-1 via a run rule walk-off in the 7th inning before a Tuesday defeat to Torres. Hanford West would close out tournament play strong, though, with a 15-4 win over Dos Palos, as the Huskies sit at 8-7 on the season and 2-2 in league play, with a pair of games versus Reedley on the schedule this week. And the Hanford High baseball team fought hard in their 4 Easter Classic games against some really tough opponents, but were unable to come up with any wins, falling to Clovis, Bullard, Edison, and Liberty Madera. The Bullpups' overall record slips to 6-9, but the league record remains unblemished at 4-0, with a pair of games with Tulare Western this week. Out to softball, where the Sierra Pacific softball team entered the week on a frustrating 4-game losing streak that saw the offense putting up runs but the defense failing to limit opponent scoring. That changed last week as the Golden Bears went 3-0 in tournament play, taking down Granite Hills 15-2, Strathmore 7-4, and Lindsay 16-2. At 6-9 overall, it'll be a busy week for Sierra Pacific this week, a pair of early week tournament games before seeing league play for the first time this year, with matchups versus Exeter and CVC. The Hanford High softball team got their tournament play started last week with a nice 3-1 win versus Clovis West, then dropped the second game of a Monday doubleheader to Madera 12-0, and fell Tuesday to Garces 13-3, as the Bullpups are 5-10 overall, with league play starting this week at Dinuba. And the Hanford West softball team faced some stiff competition in tournament action last week, going 0-4 against 4 quality opponents in Buchanan, Highland, Sanger, and Clovis. The 4-game skid drops to Huskies to 500 on the year at 8-8, but will open up league play at home this week versus Emmanuel and Selma, with a midweek non-league game at Bullard sprinkled into the mix as well. As always, if you have a score report or a team update for any team in any sport at any level, you can let us know by emailing hanfordinsider@gmail.com. I'm Eric Bentley, and this has been your Hanford Insider Sports Report.
And that wraps things up for this week's show. If you enjoyed this podcast and you'd like to show your support, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Hanford Insider to make a donation, or you can Venmo me. If you'd like to join the Hanford Insider email list, stop by my website at hanfordinsider.com to sign up for updates. You'll also get an exclusive copy of my newsletter in your inbox each week. Also need your help getting the word out about the show by liking and sharing on social media, or like most people, just telling a friend. For more information about the show, you can find this podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, and YouTube at Hanford Insider. If you have a show idea, be sure to email me at hanfordinsider@gmail.com and I'll look into it. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Hanford Insider Podcast. Have a great week.